This interview was never supposed to be made public, and yet you're reading it now. In 1954, just 1 year before his passing, Albert Einstein reportedly participated in a secret conversation, an interview that was immediately sealed and buried in classified archives. To this day, mainstream science denies it ever happened. Yet in the 21st century, due to the rediscovery of lost files, once kept by Einstein's close confidant, Dr. Kurt Gödel, these words have resurfaced. But this isn't merely an interview. It's a confession, Einstein's final thoughts, musings that stretched beyond the physical realm, reaching toward the great unknown that lies past the boundary of death. I understand how this may sound like myth sensationalism or even fabrication, yet the manuscript, Gödel's own, was uncovered in 2022 in a hidden compartment of an old safe in Princeton. The first line in the document reads, "These confessions may either awaken humanity or destroy it." The interviewer, who remains anonymous to this day, asked the first question, "Professor Einstein, do you believe life continues after death?" There was a pause. The manuscript notes a long silence, then a faint smile. Einstein finally replied, "Believe is not the right word. At my age, I prefer to know." The journalist, clearly unprepared for such an answer, followed up, "But science, your science, has always dismissed the idea of a soul." Einstein gently corrected him. "Not my science. The science known to the public only concerns itself with what is measurable, observable. It is blind to what cannot be reduced to equations." Then, with a tone of gravity, he added, "What I'm about to tell you must remain hidden until the world is ready. Life does not end with death. This is not a theory. This is a truth I arrived at not through physics, but by studying the underlying mathematical fabric of space and time." The interviewer was stunned. "Are you speaking of heaven, of the soul?" Einstein replied, "I'm speaking of continuity, of transformation. Imagine a wave upon the ocean. As long as the wind blows, the wave rises. When the wind stops, the wave disappears from sight. But the water, the energy remains. Human consciousness is that wave. The body is just a vessel. When it perishes, consciousness returns to the source, the ocean." It took several minutes before the journalist could respond. "But how does this align with your theory of relativity?" Einstein smiled again. "Relativity explains matter and energy, but one element remains outside its scope: the observer. Consciousness is not born of matter. It is the origin. The universe exists because it is observed. Ancient mystics sensed this. I confirmed it through mathematics, through the quantum double-slit experiment, through entanglement. These are not anomalies, they are clues." He paused. "Reality is shaped by awareness, and death is not the end. It is the return to the source, to pure perception." Then the journalist leaned in and asked the inevitable question, "Do you believe in God?" Einstein replied, "God is not a man on a throne. God is the ocean itself, the great consciousness where all individual awareness returns and becomes one. No being is ever lost. Death is not an end. It is a return home." Outside, the wind howled faintly. Spring of 1954 was cold and uncertain. The journalist gathered his courage. "Forgive my bluntness, Professor, but how can a scientist of your stature speak of something so metaphysical?" Einstein leaned forward. His eyes were sharp, unwavering. "You think this is faith. It is knowledge. I have observed the patterns. My work on the unified field theory led me to understand there is one framework connecting matter, energy, and consciousness." He continued, "Physicists once thought the atom was the smallest unit of reality. We were wrong. Beyond atoms lies emptiness, beyond that vibrations, the hum of the vacuum, and beyond even that," he hesitated, "mind." The journalist nodded slowly. "You're referring to the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox, entangled particles across vast distances." "Yes," Einstein said, "and that's not just physics. It's a whisper from the universe. If particles can remain connected across space, then why not consciousness across lifetimes, across death?" The air in the room seemed colder now. "So you mean to say," "Yes, Einstein affirmed, consciousness is not bound to the brain. The brain is a receiver like an antenna. When it dies, the signal doesn't stop. It simply changes frequency. The signal, the consciousness remains, like radio waves still traveling even if the radio is broken. The journalist's hand trembled as he wrote, "Why now, Professor? Why reveal this after a lifetime of silence?" Einstein grew solemn. "Because my time is nearly up, and this truth cannot die with me. Humanity is on the verge of a revelation. Death is not the enemy, it is a transition. But if this knowledge arrives too soon, it may be corrupted, weaponized, used for control. That is why I've remained silent. But I sense materialism's grip weakening. Soon science and spirit will reunite, and when they do, a door will open." At that moment, a clock began to chime, 12 slow strikes. Midnight. The journalist later wrote, "It felt symbolic, as if the universe itself affirmed what had just been said." "So what awaits us after death?" he asked, finally. Einstein answered, "It depends entirely on awareness. Those who lived for power, greed, and ego will be drawn to the lower realms, trapped in the shadows of their own unresolved desires. But those who lived with love, who sought truth and served others, they will rise, they will merge with the source and begin anew." He paused. "I believe the cycle continues. Consciousness returns again and again to learn to heal, to bring light into the world." "Rebirth?" the journalist asked. "Yes." Einstein nodded, "but not automatically. It is a choice. Free will is the highest law. When consciousness is ready, it may leave the cycle. That's what the ancients called liberation. In that moment, individuality does not end. It merges into the ocean of light. No fear, no pain, only love." He turned to the window, gazing into the starless night. "We are all travelers. Death is not a wall, it is a door." Silence fell. The journalist sat overwhelmed. He knew that one more question might unlock something irreversible, but he had to ask. "Professor, if this is true, why haven't other great minds spoken of it? Why the silence?" Einstein's smile was gentle but tinged with sorrow. "Because the truth is both simple and dangerous. Scientists fear ridicule, religions fear losing control, politicians fear losing power. But truth is freedom, and those who seek to rule cannot tolerate freedom." He added, "Some knew Newton, Planck, Tesla, even Darwin suspected something greater lay behind evolution. But each chose silence or metaphor. I too was silent. Until now, as my body weakens and my spirit prepares to depart, I finally feel the freedom to speak the truth." The journalist captured every word. His pulse raced as if standing at the edge of a great chasm. Einstein continued calmly, "Lately I revisited my renowned equation, EXMC2. That formula revealed to the world the equivalence of mass and energy. But there's a deeper layer I've never publicly shared. Consciousness, too, is energy, an exceptionally refined form. And like all energy, it can transform. When the body perishes, the energy of consciousness shifts into another state. In other realms, it goes by many names. The soul, Atman, the quantum of awareness. What you call it is irrelevant. What matters is that it continues," the journalist whispered. "So death isn't real." "Death exists," Einstein replied, "but not in the way we think. There is the death of form, of the body, of the identity tied to one lifetime, but the essence, what we truly are, is eternal. Just as energy cannot be destroyed, only changed, so too does consciousness not die. Everyone who has ever lived still exists on different planes in altered states. Their thoughts, feelings, and memories persist in a vast field, some call the Akasha, and we're connected to this field through intuition, déjà vu, sudden insights. These are echoes from that greater connection." The journalist nodded. He recalled his own inexplicable moments of foresight and deep sensation. But if this is true, he hesitated, then why suffering? Why pain, loss, illness? Einstein gazed at him deeply. "Suffering is a teacher. Without it, consciousness cannot grow. Just as muscles grow through resistance, the spirit is strengthened by hardship. Each life is a lesson, even the most difficult ones. Though we may not understand their meaning now, we will when we depart this world. Then it will become clear we were never truly alone. All paths in time lead to unity. The clock struck once. It was already 100 a.m. There's something else I must say. Einstein added, his voice firmer. In recent years, I've observed a dangerous shift. Humanity is moving toward greater division. Technology advances at lightning speed, but morality trails far behind. People forget their interconnectedness. They see enemies instead of reflections. This is perilous. If we don't awaken to our true nature, we may not survive the next century. The choice is ours, to embrace the truth that we are one or to destroy ourselves. His eyes met the journalist's. That is why I agreed to this interview. It may be my last. Let my words serve as a reminder. Death is not the end. Our enemy is not another human. It is ignorance. Knowledge is light, and light dispels darkness. The journalist could no longer suppress his emotions. He felt as though he had witnessed a revelation, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. Share this only with those who are ready to listen, Einstein said, but don't force it. Everyone must reach truth on their own. The real question isn't what comes after death, it's how we live before it. And remember this, love is the only reality that endures. The journalist sat quietly for a moment, searching for courage. Professor, he finally asked, if all this is true, is there any way to prove that consciousness continues after death? Einstein leaned back slowly. His gaze seemed to pierce through time. Science demands reproducibility and measurement, but some phenomena resist the laboratory. Their proof lies in their presence. Children who recall past lives. The mystery of quantum entanglement that hints at connections beyond space. Near-death experiences where people report events outside their bodies. Science will deny this to the end. But denial is not disproof. Quantum physics has already shattered the walls of strict materialism. Time is relative. Space is not empty. Matter is merely condensed energy. All is energy. All is consciousness. In time, scientists will build tools to detect shifts in consciousness after bodily death. It is inevitable, but even if the world had irrefutable proof of life after death tomorrow, that would not solve our greatest challenge. The journalist furrowed his brow. What challenge to change how we live? Einstein replied. To take responsibility, to realize that our thoughts, our words, our actions, they don't disappear, they echo in the field of reality. If everyone understood this, the world would be transformed. But is humanity ready for that truth? That is the question. Just then, the door creaked gently. A woman in black, Einstein's housekeeper, peeked in. Forgive me, gentlemen, it's quite late. Professor, you need your rest. Einstein nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the journalist. My body is tired, he said, but my spirit, it is ready to continue. And if someday, 10, 20, or 100 years from now, someone reads this interview, let them know I was not a mystic. I was a seeker of truth. Truth doesn't belong to religion or science. It belongs to those who seek it. He rose slowly to his feet. It's time to say goodbye, but not forever. We will meet again where all paths merge. The journalist stood too, his voice caught in his throat. Instead of speaking, he simply nodded. Einstein's final words came as a near whisper. Death is an awakening for those prepared to see. He reached out his hand. Their handshake was firm and full of warmth. Protect the light, Einstein said. The world may not be ready yet, but the time will come. And with that, Albert Einstein turned toward the window, where a faint glimmer of dawn had begun to paint the sky. The journalist lingered at the door, unable to speak. Silence filled the room. Somewhere outside, a lone thrush sang, welcoming a new day. Einstein stood by the window, his silhouette framed by the early light. "You know," he said softly, "in my youth, I believed the greatest task was to uncover the laws of the universe, to find a formula that explains everything. But with time, I realized the greatest challenge is understanding oneself and our connection to each other. Science can be learned, but the meaning of life, each must discover it for themselves." He paused. "We fear death because we fear loss, but nothing truly valuable can be lost. Love, kindness, memories, these remain. They move forward, even if we don't always understand how." The journalist closed his notebook. "Thank you, Professor. I'll carry your words." Einstein gave a faint, melancholic smile. Not to be memorized, but to be reflected upon. He extended his hand again. They shook hands, simple, human. "Live not in fear," Einstein said. "Live in search. That is all that matters." The journalist stepped into the early morning chill. Behind him, the door closed with a soft click. The day began like any other, but within him, something had changed. He walked through the quiet alley where spring leaves had just begun to bloom and thought, "It doesn't matter what awaits us later. What matters is what we do now." He wrote those words on the final page of his notebook and never opened it again. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this video. If this story made you pause and reflect, give it a like. It helps us bring important ideas to more people. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes. There are many more stories to come that will help you see the world through new eyes. Let us know in the comments what you think about Einstein's words. We read every comment and value your thoughts. Until next time, remember, truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers.